please introduce yourself, give us a brief bio, and then we'll go from there. Thanks.
Sure. Thanks, Nigel, and thanks for the opportunity to be with you. Thanks to the other candidates as well. Happy Earth Day. So I'm Suzanne Bonamici, and I'm honored to represent the 1st Congressional District. Brief bio of myself. I went to public schools and then worked my way through first community college, then college, and then law school using a combination of grants, loans, and work study. Entered public service right away doing consumer protection work, and then came back to Oregon and raised a wonderful family, became very involved as an education advocate. Then I served in the Oregon House and Senate, and I've been honored to represent the 1st Congressional District since the beginning of 2012. The district includes all of Washington County, Clatsop County, Columbia County, Yamhill County, and part of Multnomah County. And I'm running for re-election because I want to continue the work I've been doing to create a better future for the people in Northwest Oregon. And that involves essentially 3 general areas. I've always stood up for working families from my days working at Legal Aid, making sure that we have paid leave, access to healthcare, workers' rights. Second, environmental protection. And on this Earth Day, it's more clear than ever that we need to take bold action to address the climate crisis. And third, public education. It's been a passion of mine for years, having gone through public schools myself and becoming an active volunteer, and knowing that public schools can create opportunities for everyone in this country to have a path to success in life. And I'm honored to serve as the chair of the Civil Rights and Human Services Subcommittee on the Education and Labor Committee. So I'm running for re-election to continue work in those 3 areas and more. Nigel, I'm not hearing you.
I think you're okay. He hasn't said anything.
Okay, thanks, ma'am.
I apologize. I had a few freeze there. Heidi, could you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, certainly. My name's Heidi Briones, and I'm a Democrat running for U.S. Representative in District 1. A little bit about my background. I was actually pre-law in college, and I graduated from UC Santa Cruz in 2006 and entered the workforce just as the recession was getting rolling. And like myself, and I believe probably Ricky and Amanda, we've experienced how this economy has been punitive on us. So when I graduated, rather than going to law school, I decided to become an educator and a teacher. And I spent the better part of a decade teaching English as a second language in Taiwan and also South Korea, as well as Los Angeles and San Francisco. Though teaching just didn't frankly pay the bills in this economy. So I had to take up other work, such as working as a gig worker. I drove for Lyft. I worked as a self-employed person as well. I even went into a PhD program and became a linguist for quite some time and a professor. After that, I took a job at a Tesla factory where I saw firsthand the effects of technology and automation. And I realized that so many manufacturing jobs and other jobs were going to be displaced by technology. That's when I heard about a concept called universal basic income, and I became an advocate for that policy. So I'm running because I believe that we have new challenges facing our economy, and I do not see our leaders and officials addressing them in a pressing manner. We are going to lose millions of jobs to technology and automation in the coming decade, and I don't see the right action being taken for that. So I'm a proponent of things like universal basic income, universal health care, and reforming our democracy to work for everyone. So the grassroots candidates like myself, Amanda, and Ricky can have a shot and can actually have a say and have a level playing field when we do run for office.
Heidi, sorry, when did you move to Oregon?
I moved to Oregon in November of 2018 after I married my wife in Reno, Nevada when I was living there. And then I moved to Oregon after that point so that we could start a new life and a new family here because that's what we wanted. We wanted a fresh start, and I love it. And I live in Hillsboro, Oregon, and I'm very proud to live in District 1 and in Hillsboro.
Great, thank you. Amanda, please tell us about yourself.
Hi, my name is Amanda Seavey, and I'm running for the United States House of Representatives as a Democrat in Oregon's 1st District. I've lived in this district a majority of my life. I went to Raleigh Hills, Whitford, Jesuit, and then went on to Western Oregon University. I worked my way through high school and college. I studied international relations and sociology in Western Oregon University. But I thought the best way I could serve my community was as an EMT and firefighter. But while I was saving up for tuition to enter the paramedic program, I fell at work. And what should have been a simple 6-week sprained ankle, no problem, something every one of us, I'm sure, has dealt with at some point in time, turned into full body nerve damage, a condition called complex regional pain syndrome or reflex sympathetic dystrophy, all because my employer was allowed to place more priority on their profits than my health. And since becoming disabled, I've seen how all those programs that should be there, those safety nets, just aren't. They've been cut so much that they're basically unusable. Either that or they take so long to get onto that you could honestly be dead before you ever collect benefits or see any help whatsoever. And that's just not how things should be. We need representatives who actually fight for us. And we need to make sure that we have people on our side. Disability rights is something I'm really, really passionate about. I've been working and serving and fighting as an activist all my adult life, from going to marches and protests to community organizing and grassroots organizing. And we still have been leaving disability rights behind. While other communities have been able to fight for their rights, the disabled community is forgotten. There are so many changes that we need. A majority of our country is still inaccessible to those with disabilities. We don't have any representatives in the United States House of Representatives that are disabled women. I would be the second in the history of our Congress, second disabled woman. And that's just insane. It's 2020. We need real representation and we need real changes. We need to fight for equality so that everybody has health care, a job, housing, so they can live with the dignity that we all deserve. We need to ensure that we all have the government reform that we need so that candidates like Ricky, Heidi, and I have those opportunities to run and represent those underrepresented districts and those underrepresented communities. We need public funding of elections. We need term limits to make sure that other candidates have a chance. We appreciate so many things that Suzanne Bonamici has been able to do in this district, but it's time for new ideas and new representation. We have the opportunity to really make change happen and get the reform that we need to make sure that all the underrepresented communities finally have a voice and a platform so we can get the change that we need to live with equality, dignity, and respect. And that's why I'm running.
Great, thank you. Could I ask everybody who's not speaking to please mute your phone? We're picking up a lot of background noise here. And Ricky, please introduce yourself. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Nice to see you again, Nigel. Good morning, Representative Suzanne. My name is Ricky Barajas. I'm originally from Los Angeles, California. I studied political science. I graduated with a degree in public service. I moved to Portland in 2017. I had an opportunity to transfer up here as part of my dental company. So ever since then, I made Portland my home, which I'm really excited and happy to be here and start my career and start a family like Heidi and also Amanda. The reason I'm running for Congress and office is the same reason I did 2 years ago, is to invest in the American family. My message since the beginning, 2 years ago, was people have been left behind after the recession 10 years ago. People have been misplaced. People that lost so much money in their 401ks, their pensions, their homes are going to be, we're going to see a replicate of that scene in the next few weeks, because so many people are struggling just to get by and get unemployment because the lines are so long. I'm a testament of that, because it's been 5 weeks since I placed my claim and I have not received a single penny from Salem. So imagine just myself, imagine hundreds of people across the district and across the country who have not received their benefits, who have not received their stimulus check, are struggling to pay their bills, are struggling to pay rent. They're going to be in a financial hole that we don't know they can crawl out of that. And that's not okay anymore. We have to stop putting pressure on American families. We have to stop bailing out corporations. We have to stop bailing out big banks, invest in American people, invest in American families so they can finally thrive, so they can get out of debt, so they can pay those credit card bills and the mortgage bills. Right now, what we're seeing is a second recession and an attack on the middle class. If we don't change this now and put in effective laws, we want to make sure we're going to be proactive than reactive. We want to make sure that we put in laws in place and systems that if this ever happens again in this pandemic, 10 years from now, we're prepared. I know as I spoke with Heidi and Amanda, we all have great platforms that if this were ever happen again in 10 years, we have new ideas to put in place that if people were to be out of placement, we can send checks within days and not weeks. We can make sure systems are in place. We have Oregon, the Salem, their unemployment, system is outdated by 10 years. Why is that? The federal government sent the money 10 years ago to replace the system, and it hasn't been replaced. That's a lack of accountability and a lack of leadership. So we have to change the status quo across the country, state level and federal. There's a lot of issues we can talk right now, which we are going to talk about in the next few minutes. This is why I believe in my message, I believe in Amanda's, and I believe in Heidi's, that we have new ideas to change this district and change the future for all Americans.
Thank you. Ricky, we saw you 2 years ago. I'm wondering in the past 2 years whether you've found different ways to get engaged in the community, whether you've been involved politically or civically or with community organizations that you could tell us about.
Thank you. Yeah, I've been trying to get involved in different aspects of the community. I've been trying to volunteer my time. Throughout the last 2 years, I still focus my time on working a full-time job. So anyone who's working a full-time job and trying to run for office can tell you it's a very difficult thing to do. But I try to manage my time to the best of my abilities to definitely be responsible with my personal life, give back to the community, be an activist. Try to do my best to donate my time and spend time with other people, and then also run a successful campaign. I've recently, the last 6 weeks, I've been definitely supporting other candidates for down ballot elections coming up. We have an election coming up May 19, of course, with the mayor and the opponent, Teresa Mayford, which I've been supporting and advocating for her. So my time has been supporting other candidates, reaching out across the aisle, reaching out to Amanda, reaching out to Heidi, as far as what can we do together that benefits the district, our community, and ourselves. It's a lot of work, but again, if we come together and work for a better future, we can get there together.
Thanks. Representative Bonamici, can you tell us about a couple of pieces of legislation you've worked on in the past 2 years that have made a material benefit to people in your district?
Oh, absolutely. The Older Americans Act, which I started working on and passed in 2016 when I was in the minority. And we just passed it again, but we improved the programs. We got additional funding. And this is to support older Americans and people with disabilities. And we got every program, like Meals on Wheels, community meals programs, addressing elder abuse, increased funding for all of those, and that was just signed into law. And in fact, just this morning, we found out there's additional funding coming through those programs to Oregon. That was a piece of legislation we're also working on and hope to get passed soon in the House, the College Affordability Act. And I've had a lot to do with that. We were planning to bring it to the floor, and then of course, coronavirus happened. Higher education is something that I care deeply about, that access. And I remember the 7 years, it was hard. Grants, loans, work study, food stamps, not knowing each day if I was going to have enough to eat to get through to my classes. And we have to make sure that the doors are open for everyone who wants to go through higher education. And so the College Affordability Act increases Pell Grants, reforms work study, which is desperately needed to make sure that the work study dollars are going to the students who need it. And really addressing the student loan debt crisis, which is something that I care deeply about. So we're almost ready to get that across the floor, these things that make a difference in people's lives. But there are other pieces of legislation that...
Before we go further, so what would the bill actually do in terms of reforming the current student debt scenario?
It would do a lot, the College Affordability Act, going forward, fix the public service loan forgiveness program, which is a mess. That was passed in 2007 before my time in Congress to incentivize people going into public service. And then after 10 years, they would get the balance forgiven. It's not working because Secretary DeVos is only approving 1% to 2% of the people who apply for that forgiveness at the end of their 10 years. This would fix that. It would get more people into income-driven repayment, automatically connect them. The Treasury Department can talk to the Education Department, make sure that they're not going into default. But also, we, in light of coronavirus, many of us are advocating for student debt forgiveness right now. I hope we can get that done, but in light of who's running the Senate and the Senate majority, we probably won't get that through the Senate, but certainly through the House to make sure that people are not struggling. I've had people just talk about how desperate they are with that student loan debt. So it would make a big difference in college affordability. People should be able to go through college and not graduate with debt.
Great. Okay, thanks. I'd like each of the challengers to tell me or tell us one place where you believe you differ from the incumbent, whether it's a bill that she took a position on or a position that's part of her platform, where you would disagree or be able to differentiate yourself from your opponent. Amanda, we'll start with you on this one.
Thank you so much. One thing that I've noticed is whenever we talk about the disabled community, it always comes back to the elderly and the disabled vets. And while those are both very important and valued members of the community, it's so much bigger than that. We don't qualify for a lot of those programs that is in that Older Americans Act. You know, Wheels on Wheels does not help us. We don't qualify for that. We don't qualify for so many of those benefits. So we're left with these starvation wages. And Suzanne, she fights very hard for the senior citizens. There's so many of us that are left behind. And we need to ensure that Social Security is more than just these starvation wages. I mean, the average benefit for disability is $1,200 a month, with the minimum being what I live on, $750 a month. And you can't afford to live on that. For supplemental social income, the maximum benefit is $770 a month. This is not good enough. We can't just fight to keep the status quo going. We need to move forward. We need to push to make these programs living wages. Just by making those three programs, Social Security, supplemental social income, and disability, a living wage, we would cut the homelessness rate by over half. We would be able to reduce the reliance on social programs like SNAP and Section 8, giving people the ability to live and have the dignity they deserve, increasing the quality of life for 81 million people. We can't just accept these programs as good enough right now when so many are starving and homeless. 40% of our homeless population is disabled. 30% of it is over 65. The programs are not good enough. The minute changes are not good enough. We need radical reform. And that's, I believe, where we differ the biggest. I'm not okay with the status quo because I see so many people starving and suffering and struggling to make ends meet. Just like Heidi and Ricky, we understand this because we live it every day. We stand in line for food banks. I've been waiting for years for Section 8 and still haven't gotten it. This isn't good enough. In college, I had a child to get health care. This is what we're forcing people to do. This is what we're forcing families to do. We need to do better. We deserve better. And that's what I plan to fight for, is better.
Great, thank you. Ricky, what would you point to draw a distinction between you and the incumbent, someplace you disagree?
Thanks for the question, Nigel. There's two areas where I would differentiate myself, and I think move the platform further. Although I think Congress for passing the stimulus check or, passing some kind of relief, is not enough. It's not enough. I'm not sure if Congress got out of touch with the American people, what it is to live day by day. But for them to think $1,200 in our first stimulus would get us by is ridiculous. Who gets by $1,200? We hear us right now ton about her story. That's ridiculous. I put in on my Facebook, social media, on my platform weeks before Congress is passing a new bill, a minimum of $2,000 per individual, up to $5,000 per family, suspend mortgages, suspend credit cards up to 4 or 5 months, put a freeze on credit cards, on credit scores, because that's going to affect the American people so much in the next few months. We see Congress pass laws just for the short term, but not for the long term. I still believe a big portion of society and our American people and this district is going to be so hurt after this COVID-19 is over. We cannot allow this to continue. We have to think progressive now, not later. We have to be proactive with laws. We have to make sure that no one's left behind. So for Congress to pass that, I believe it's a slap in the face of the American people, just $1,200. We need more than that. Second, I do thank Suzanne Bonamici for going down to the border a few months ago. That's admirable, and I thank her. However, we have to make sure we address the situation here with ICE. I have not seen immigration on Suzanne Bonamici's website. ICE is a big concern to this district. ICE was here last summer, putting people out of metro, out of buses, out of trains. And where was the representative from our state, from our local, and our federal? There is no one to be found. People are hurting with ICE when they go to the courthouse, when they go to schools, when they go everywhere. So we need to make sure with immigration, we address it. We got to tell ICE they're not welcome here. We got to limit their resources and disband this now once and for all. This community is so diverse, which is I'm proud to be here in District 1 and represent it. But again, if we can't fix a simple situations such as ICE attacking a community, we're going to displace families, displace the community, and it's going to hurt the businesses because we rely on all these people to support a community and support our businesses. So we have to make sure we fight for immigration, ban ICE once and for all, and definitely move forward with progressive bills that provides quality life for people throughout this COVID-19.
Thank you. Heidi, same question for you. Where would you draw a distinction between you and the incumbent?
Yeah, certainly. I appreciate the question. I do commend the representative for the work that she's done for, she said, working families, environment, and public education. I do find that a little bit concerning that she's on the Science, Space, and Technology Committee, yet I haven't heard her mention the threat of automation to people's jobs coming up in the next decades. I just couldn't find a quote, and she could correct me if I'm wrong. If that's a concern for her, that's great. But that's where I would differ mostly, is that my concern is that we're not taking the threat of AI and automation serious enough, and that our leaders are way behind on technology, and they're not aware of the threats that are coming up. So that would be my main thing, is that universal basic income is a clean and straightforward way to solve a lot of these problems without the government bureaucracy that's been shown to not be effective, such as job retraining programs, which are only effective 15% of the time, which is not very effective. We need to get money into people's hands. It is clear, based on the COVID-19 pandemic, like Ricky said, a one-time stimulus payment of $1,200, which was means tested, by the way, so left many people out, including stay-at-home mothers who might not have filed a tax return for whatever reason, students, people that happen to not be able to file tax returns for different reasons. They got $0 into their hands during this pandemic so far, and everybody else got a one-time payment of $1,200, which is concerning. So I would hope that the representative, I did see her call for an emergency UBI that was means tested. I would encourage her to support full universality on a basic income, at least through the pandemic. And we're calling right now for $2,000 per month per adult, plus $500 per month per child, until we are out of this pandemic. And I think that that would be an excellent way for the representative to show that she understands that we're starving and that we're facing poverty right now. That would be a huge difference. I don't believe that we need another means tested program. And also her comment on student debt. This student debt was acquired in a predatory manner. And I can speak from personal experience. When you have a university that is willing to put you into $100,000 worth of debt, which I'm sure the representative struggled when she went to school and had to get grants and be on food stamps and many things, like many of us. However, tuition has gone up, I believe, about 4 times since the time that she was in college and in university. So our struggles are huge. I still have student debt. It was given to us in a predatory manner. We weren't told how we were actually able to get jobs or even help to get jobs when we got out. And our tuition costs went up extreme amounts, with the cost of living going up, coinciding with it. So I would say we need to cancel all current student debt. I would say that it was gotten in a predatory fashion. And I would say we need free community college. I'm sure the representative loved her time at community college, just like I did. And I think that we should encourage that. We should move to a K-14 system where that's free all the way up to community college, so that people can work on their trades, work on getting their general education requirements done for free, and see if they even want to go to college before they rack up 6 figures worth of debt. So that's the main areas that I disagree. I would say we need a full universal basic income, get people out of poverty now, make it clean and universal, and cancel all student debt, and worry about technology. If you're on the technology committee, I would love to hear you talking about the threat of AI and technology to our economy, because that's coming.
Great. Mark Zussman, I believe you had a question.
Nigel, do I get to respond to any of those?
You do, but I think Mark wanted to jump in. Let me see if he jumps in first, then we'll give you a chance to respond. Mark?
Okay.
Mark, you need to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Sorry. I have 3 short questions. The first is to the Congresswoman. Suzanne, let's assume you run and get reelected as often as you like. How many terms will you serve? You're on mute.
Thank you. I should know better. That's a lot of our caucus calls, is reminding people to get off mute. As long as the people will have me, I'm interested, and as long as I'm making progress and getting things done, as I did both for my first almost 7 years in the minority party and now in the majority party.
Congresswoman, with all due respect, you're 65 years old. I do think you think about your future as you should. Assuming you get reelected as often as you like, how many terms will you serve?
I can't answer that, Mark, because if I'm getting things done and accomplishing through policy that improves the lives of people in Northwest Oregon, I will continue to serve. I don't have current plans to retire.
And you don't believe that at a certain point it's important for you to move aside and make room for a younger generation?
Well, eventually, yes, but I don't know.
I'm trying to ask when that eventually is.
Oh, I don't know at this point.
Okay. Let me ask a question of the 3 opponents. I believe, if I'm correct, that none of you have any elective experience. Is that correct? You can just nod if I'm right. So, one of the things that our editorial board looks for is values, smarts, independence, an understanding of the system, but we also do look for a certain amount of experience. And frankly, I think we have a little bit of a bias against someone running for federal office when they have never demonstrated success in any legislative body. So at the risk of being too blunt, could each of the three of you explain why you think it's not important for you to run for office at a lower level, demonstrate to the voters of your district that you've got the ability, not just the passion, not just the values, not just the work ethic, but the actual ability to work with other people in a legislative body. My next question is for, I believe, Heidi and Ricky, both of whom have been living in Oregon for less than 2 or 3 years. Is that correct? Is it fair to assume that? Well,
sorry,
okay.
I've been here about almost 4 years now.
Okay. I'm going to make an argument and ask you to respond to it after you respond to the first question, which is 4 years is not nearly long enough to understand a district to be able to argue that you can represent it in Congress. So let's start with asking the three of you to talk about your lack of legislative experience and why that isn't a hurdle. Go ahead.
I would love to jump in if that's all right. Being in Congress is not the only way you can get congressional change. I mean, for example, I've been working at a local level in the Monmouth Independence Tenants Union. When I ran that in college, we got big change down there and we made it happen. When I've been working with the disabled community, not only here in Oregon, where we got the opiate prescribing overturned so that patients with chronic and debilitating pain are not being forcibly tapered from their opiate pain management. We got that stopped here in Oregon, and we got it stopped at a federal level. We've made some serious changes to that. There are ways to get change and make it happen and organize without being in Congress. And I think that my history and my track record can prove that.
Why did you not run for the legislature or a smaller office?
Honestly, I really didn't think that I had a chance. I was raised in a family that believed that the closest a woman should come to politics was as a politician's wife. I had that beat into my head. And then when I saw Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, when I saw Rashida Tlaib, when I saw Ilhan Omar, when I saw them win, and they didn't have any background, they didn't have any experience, but look at them. They are some of the most active and influential members of our Congress right now. And that's what I plan to be.
Okay. Ricky?
Yeah, so thanks for the question. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think the Constitution says we need to run for local or state officers before we go to federal. Second, Barack Obama challenged all of us during his speeches across throughout the last years to challenge ourselves, make change. He said he's not the change, we're the change. So for anyone to say, why don't you run for local or state office? Well, we see the serious and the threat of larger issues at a national level. We see more issues that we can make effective change. We know that we can be in a force if we were to run for office, be in office, introduce bills, co-sponsor bills. We want to make sure this is why we have a division of party where Bernie supporters are saying enough's enough. Because if we're not going to welcome the new generation, the new ideas, we're going to have a split in the general election and moving forward. With all due respect to Suzanne, after 10 years, I think it's time to give it up. It was a nice run and pass the baton. I don't want to be a career politician. I want to spend at least 8 years, do what I can do, pass legislation, co-sponsor bills, work across the aisle, and pass the baton to the new generation. That's how ideas and that's how our country moves forward. But if we had the same status quo, the same establishment there, not giving anyone else a chance and just making, and like Suzanne said, she goes, I don't know when I want to retire. That's not a sufficient answer for us and her community. Where Amanda, Heidi, and us, and I, just to finish really quick, we went around door to door knocking, and people have said, and with all due respect, Suzanne, I'm sorry, who is she? So that should say a lot about her, where she's not reaching her whole district. I haven't been here.
Okay. Heidi, do you want to answer the same question? you're on mute.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, for one, I agree with what Ricky said. I mean, if the laws are set up in a certain way, we have to respect how they're set up. And I believe that the Constitution and our founding fathers wanted us to be represented by the people, or they would have established that you needed to run for local, and then you needed to run for state, and then you needed to run for federal. That might be what our, culture has decided is okay now for the status quo, but that's just not legally a requirement. So I think that there's a reason for that. And the reason for that is that they wanted the people to be able to vote in who they thought was the best person and the best qualified based on who they are. I mean, my first job was as a legislative aide. I worked as a legislative aide every single summer when I was in high school in Sacramento, which is very, similar to working federally in a lot of ways as far as working in a legislative branch. Okay, so I understand how laws are made, how they're passed, the things that go on, and I understand how important having a good staff is. Okay, legislators do not run the whole show on their own, and they hire people with experience and institutional knowledge so that they understand how certain things are done and gotten through. So I don't think that it's a hindrance at all to have somebody without elected experience in the federal government. And it was, then we should change the Constitution and the laws if that's the case. As far as living in the district for a long time, again, that's another thing with being a federal representative. If I wanted to run for city council, I have to live in Hillsborough for an entire year, and then I can run for city council because I would need to know a little bit about the city. Why is it not even a requirement to live in the district to run for federal office? I could run for federal office in a different district in the state if I wanted to, and that's legally acceptable. Why? Because the people get to choose who they think is the best person to represent them based on actual policy, actual facts, what that person actually stands for. And
Heidi,
that's what I think is important.
Heidi, you misunderstand me. At no point am I suggesting that there's anything legally wrong with what you or Ricky are doing. My point is simply, how do you claim to really understand a district that you've been living in for a handful of months? I mean, how do you understand how do you understand what the people of Manzanita's concerns are?
I understand what the nation's concerns are, and we're representing.
I'm talking about your district. How do you understand?
Well, I've talked to them, first of all. When I talk to them, again, like Ricky, they don't.
Wait. You talk to who?
I talk to people in our district.
Well, do you even know your district? Because I mentioned Manzanita, and Manzanita is not in your district.
Okay.
It's outside your congressional district. So I think there's a legitimate question about how well you and Ricky understand a district that you're seeking to represent when I just mentioned a town that's outside of your district and you didn't notice it. And
okay, so is that the type of, I thought this was a respectful conversation. I didn't realize this was a chance for you to come out and attack grassroots candidates that actually do have a message.
If you believe hard questions are disrespectful, then I guess this is a disrespectful conversation.
It's just ingenuous. It's just a little ingenuous. That's all. It's not necessarily disrespectful, but.
If I might chime in, Mark, we have our district is right in front of me. I have the map of my district. We have a huge part of our rural communities that are not being represented, that their voices are not being heard. We can look at all the map right now. We can look at all the towns, but the fact is the majority of people that we focus on is strictly in Washington County. We need to make sure we go as far as Astoria, all the way down to the end of District 1. We have to make sure we address each individual's concerns. And like Heidi said, we have done our grassroots work. We have done door-to-door knocking, and we have called people. So if it's not sufficient, we called all the 300,000 voters, granted. But we reached out to enough voters to know there's a real concern and a real concern for change. And that's why we know for a fact there's some issues we need to address.
Mark and Nigel, do I get a chance to weigh in now?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Terrific. Well, thank you. And I really appreciate, all the ideas that came from Amanda and Heidi and Ricky, but they're not areas where there's any significant difference. I just had a great telephone conversation or Zoom conversation yesterday with a whole group that advocates for students with disabilities. I'm a proud sponsor of a major reform to Social Security, including Social Security disability. With regard to the stimulus check, Ricky, if you or anyone thinks that I think that $1,200 is a one-time payment is enough, that's not correct. I'm pushing for much more than that. I'm a co-sponsor of my friend and colleague Pramila Jayapal's Paycheck Guarantee Bill. I know we need more than that. The political reality is that we have to deal with the Trump administration, which is, of course, responsible for a lot of where we are by inadequate planning and ignoring science, and Mitch McConnell running the Senate. Same thing with immigration reform. When Isidro was surrounded by plainclothes ICE agents outside the courthouse in Hillsborough, I spoke up, I spoke out, and I got the ICE people to come into a meeting so I could grill them specifically here in Washington, D.C. It wasn't on the public record because the then chairman, Trey Gowdy, wouldn't allow it to be on the public record, but I grilled them about it because it's outrageous what they did. And with regard to the automation conversations, thank you, Heidi. Yes, we have had many conversations, and not only in the Science, Space, and Technology Committee, but also in the Education and Labor Committee, where we talk about how we prepare people today for the jobs of tomorrow. My great colleague, Bill Foster, who is a real leader on that as well. We've had roundtable conversations with industry, with Elon Musk, with labor to make sure that we are planning for that in our education system and in our workforce system. And we already have, for the most part, free community college in Oregon, although Tennessee was ahead of us. Of course, that's something that I believe in. The political reality is that many of these things that these platform positions, we advocate for them strongly in the House. This is my first time in the majority. It's great to be in the majority, but we still have an obstructionist Senate and the Trump administration. So it's not that we don't care about these issues. And you know, right now, what people really care about, I tell you, I just had a conversation with a restaurant owner over on the coast. I talked to people. There's close to 800,000 people in Congressional District 1 now. And you represent all of them. You don't just represent the voters. I talked to a restaurant owner who said it was the hardest day of his life when he had to lay off his employees. And he had an application for the Small Business Administration Paycheck Protection Program pending, but then the funds ran out. So tomorrow morning, I'm going to vote for the bill to get more money in that account, even though it doesn't do as much as I want it to do. We made great progress in improving it, but it's not what I as a Democrat would want. But the reality is when you serve in divided government, sometimes you make a step and then you keep working for it. I helped the owner of an assisted living center in Washington County where they lost a resident and had a lot of residents tested positive and staff tested positive. I helped them free up some protective equipment, personal protective equipment that he had to import because he couldn't get enough here, and it was stopped at the border. I spoke with nurses who have been in tears because you hear this strain in their voice because they don't know that they have that equipment. I'm fighting to get that. I talked to a respiratory therapist who said he's in his 30s. He was writing a will because he feels so unsafe without the protective equipment. Fighting for that. We've been helping. Yes, thank you for Heidi for recognizing the importance of great staff. I also served as a legislative aide. I know that we're helping people get back who are stuck abroad. We're helping them back to the United States. I was just talking to somebody 2 days ago from a constituent who was so frustrated with trying to enter direct payment information into the portal and it didn't work. And you're right, the unemployment checks are not rapidly getting to people because we do use an antiquated system. That's a state issue, and I'm pushing our state leaders to make sure that that's done as well. We did fund additional staff so they can help processing those. Helped a constituent get an airline refund. And I did want to mention too, with regard to the predatory student debt, Heidi, my background is in consumer protection, and I have been a leader and always speaking out and being a voice when President Obama's administration put into place great protections against predatory for-profit institutions. And then Secretary DeVos, who's been a disaster, just wants to ignore them. And I've been a leader on those issues as well. Absolutely, we need to make sure that people who have been struggling with predatory student debt get that loan debt forgiven. And I've been working on that as well. Am I the first to say that it's challenging to work with Secretary DeVos? Absolutely, but we need to keep pushing back on her and the administration. So, in terms of these values, like Heidi and Amanda and Ricky were talking about, I share those values. A lot of my values come from my mom. She's 91. She's a lung cancer survivor. She lives in a long-term facility in Oregon. I haven't been able to see her, and that makes me really sad right now. She's not real good at technology, but I try to get the staff to FaceTime with her when I can. But she was always ahead of her time. She had an organic garden. She was a small business owner. She marched for civil rights back in the 60s. I grew up outside of Detroit, Michigan, and she went downtown Detroit and marched for civil rights. And we left. She took our family. We left a church where she was the organist because they wouldn't take a stand on civil rights. So
Okay, Suzanne, let's slow you down there.
Okay.
Sorry. Let's shift the conversation a little bit to the COVID-19 crisis. In each interview, we have a question that we ask all candidates, and this year, obviously, we're all going through something we've never encountered before. I would like each of you to tell us something. This is a lighter-hearted question that you will always remember about this stay home, stay safe time, something you've done, something you've not done, somebody you've talked to that you haven't talked to in 20 years. Just give us a brief memory that you'll hold with you. And Ricky, we'll start with you on this.
Brief memory would be not being prepared for a pandemic. Although we could talk all day about things that are in place or implemented, it's not really realistic for the 21st century and for the people. Like I mentioned myself, I've been waiting for 5 weeks for unemployment, and I'm still waiting. There's no way to get across Salem to get any kind of answers. So imagine my frustration, imagine other people. I have a safety net. Thank God I have a safety net. Other people don't. Other people are just really trying to figure out what to do, pay rent or pay bills. And it's a struggle. I don't have family here. If I fail, I have to move back to LA. That's a real decision making. So I can just imagine what other people are going through. So that's why I'm so passionate about things that I mentioned. I'm passionate about people that I've talked to. And I'm passionate about making change because COVID-19 just opened us a window and showed us that we're not prepared and this will happen again. And we have to make sure that this does not happen again. And we can't predict the future. We can't. But we have to be proactive to make sure that if this happens again, we're fully funded, fully ready, and ready to tackle the challenge on day 1, not day 30 or day 31. So this will ever live with me for the next 10 or 20 years to remember what it was to live in 2020.
Great, thank you. Heidi, what's something you'll always remember about this time?
Yeah, I mean, this is the first time I've run a campaign, so that's pretty memorable to have to do it 100% digital as a grassroots candidate. I feel like I should probably write like a book on the subject or something from all the things that we've been learning about and how we can outreach and do things that normally we would traditionally do by pounding pavement and things like that. So I've built a nice community with the basic income advocates that I know, and we've been talking daily. And it's really exciting, actually, even though it's a sad time, it's exciting that such an important issue like universal basic income is at the forefront right now due to the fact that we need it. And I think that's what happens is that sometimes something bad happens and it can spur good ideas and creativity and all of these things that are coming together and us figuring out our technology and hopefully spurring the government to get their act together and figure out how to make our technology work better and be in 2020 as opposed to the 80s, which it feels like that we are in a lot of times. So I think that when we come out of this on the other end, I'm very optimistic actually about the future because important issues are coming to light, such as UBI, universal healthcare, reforming our democracy, having mail-in voting like we already have in Oregon. Hopefully we move to that on a national level so that if something happens, we don't have this problem again. So I think overall being able to talk to people like-minded in my community digitally and work on things together and realize that even if we can't physically be together, we have the technology now to get things done. And so I'll always remember just campaigning digitally this year and being on the trail, so to speak, online.
Great, thank you. Amanda, how about you? What's a memory you'll take away from this?
I mean, this is funny for me because this is new for all you guys, but this is the life of disabled people for years. We've been stuck in our homes for so long. Welcome to our world. I mean, the world, it's inaccessible. So we've been stuck here for a long time. So this is nothing new for me. I've had to learn how to connect with people online from the very beginning because, you know, canvassing and everything is really hard in a wheelchair with a service dog. You can't go and door knock. But I think what will really stick with me the most out of this entire experience was Representative Bonamici's town hall when this first started coming out and when she finally decided to have a town hall for the community. We got a couple really good pieces of advice from her, like take out a loan, or it's all right, just call my office and we'll get that help to you. And so when I called her office and I tried to get that help because I live in a low income apartment, rent subsidized, you know, I have people here that are begging me, what do we do? How do we survive? How do I pay my rent? What am I going to eat this week? We're talking about opening up community food banks and soup kitchens out of my house because we need to feed people. And so when I called and I begged for help, you know, there was no help to be had. And there were empty hands. There was a, well, you should call Meals on Wheels. They'll help. And we need real solutions, real answers. And that was the moment that I realized there's no help coming. Those on Social Security programs, we still haven't gotten our checks. We still haven't gotten anything. We still haven't gotten any help. We're still starving. I mean, this is just another disappointment in our life.
Amanda, can I pipe in here and just ask you a question?
Yeah.
I checked out your Twitter account early this morning, and it's an interesting feed. And you posted a tweet about an hour ago in which you talked about this endorsement interview and how you were going to make Willamette Week understand that Suzanne Bonamici has had years in office and has accomplished quote unquote nothing.
Yeah.
You feel that way?
That's honestly how I feel, is that our community, when we were begging for help to get, you know, those who live with chronic debilitating pain, when we were trying to get them the opiates that they need for functionality and quality of life, we begged her, we called her, we tried to reach out and talk to her, and we got nothing. And in the meantime, she did a tax dollar funded, you know, deep dive into the opiate epidemic and decided to advocate for, you know, a general prohibition and a reduction on opiates and making, you know, which would make it harder for us to live. Like, I depend on those medications for my functionality and quality of life. Without them, I die. We reach out and we reach out and we beg, and she's either not in district, not around, or, you know, doesn't, you know, you get that placating message back and you don't get any personal interaction. And that's the problem. We feel left behind by her. So we feel like we are not properly represented. And that's what I hear from voters and constituents and people all over this district. They either don't know who she is, they're tired of being ignored, or they're out of touch and they're so done with the establishment politics that they don't care. We need time for change. And I promise this district.
Thank you.
Okay.
Is it my turn?
Suzanne, quick follow-up, and then we are almost out of time, so very quickly.
Did you want me to? Okay, I will follow up. What I will remember are the voices that I've heard from people across Northwest Oregon, what they're going through, but also the disparity that's been highlighted in so many areas, whether it be rural broadband, access to healthcare. I will remember that, and the lessons learned from this. And you said on a lighter note, I'm in a wonderful text chain with several colleagues, and we have to have a humorous moment now and then, and we share funny moments of Zoom calls gone bad. But I do want to say that the people in Northwest Oregon, I do hear you. Amanda, my sister-in-law, lived with chronic pain her whole life until she died. I myself have not gone through what you're going through. I hear you, and I know my staff has reached out to you, and that's why I'm pushing for policies that help create a better future for everyone in Northwest Oregon. So thank you so much to the Willamette Week. I would be proud to earn your endorsement again.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We've got another one of these right after this, so I'd like to thank you all for participating and wish you all the best of luck. Thank you.
Thank you. Stay safe out there.
Thank you so much.